got a time change on here. The board workshop, June 24th, 2024 at 6:03. Are we going to be all right because it says 6:30 on there?
Yeah, that's the right one.
Okay. Before we get too far into it, I'd like to swap 5 and 6, just so you know, they'll still stay on the agenda, but swap them. It makes more sense to have the hearing of the public after the presentation than before. So if anybody's here wants to ask questions, they can. Okay. Please call the roll.
Mr. Grunberg.
Here.
Dr. Mr. Williams here. Mr. Roscoe.
Here.
Mrs. Rayford.
Here.
Mrs. Richardson.
Present.
And Mrs. Grunberg.
Here.
Okay. We stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion for approval of the agenda with the change of 5 and 6 changed?
Place forth a motion to approve the agenda with the changing of, swapping of 5 and 6.
Support.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Roscoe.
Yes.
Dr. Early.
Yes.
Mr. Grunberg.
Yes.
Mr. Williams. Yes. Mrs. Rayford.
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson. And Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, next we have business operations. We have 3 different items.
So, talk about tonight is the 2024 amended budget.
Can you put your microphone on?
Sure. We're going to be talking about this evening is the 2024 amended budget, which is the current fiscal year, final budget, and the budget for fiscal 25, which is the next school year, and then a tax rate that supports our revenue for fiscal 25. Next slide, please. One more. So this is a portion of the general fund. The revenue and expenses are on 2 different slides. So this year, we had revenue of $49.5 million, and that number is quite high compared to prior years because we have a lot of federal and state grants in this money. If you look at the 3rd line down, federal, we have almost $16 million of federal grants. About 12 of that, about 11 of that is ESSER funds, ESSER 3 grant that we've talked about in the past. So as we see when we go to next year, all but about $2 million of that is going to drop off. The furniture that we ordered a few months back is going to come in this summer, and that expenditure will actually occur in fiscal 25. Next slide down, please. So if you just go right to the bottom, we have a fund balance of almost 30%. That is really good. I mean, it wasn't like 10 years ago that we were in a deficit. So we have a real strong fund balance. MSBO would like to see a 15% fund balance for school districts as a cushion. And the state of Michigan recommends a 5% early warning. So if our fund equity dips below 5%, then we have to start doing special reporting to the state, and they'll monitor us to try to help us get above that 5%. So all these expenses are all inflated with federal and state grants. A couple noteworthy items. We had a lot of curriculum purchases during the year. That's going to come under, the basic instruction at the top. We had a significant amount of ESSER funding that went into our operations and maintenance area. You see halfway down there, it's like $5.1 million. We have our capital outlays on facilities over here of $3.1 million. That's all ESSER money that went into HVAC and other building improvements. This does not reflect bond money, and this does not reflect sinking fund money. So this is just our general fund. We have a surplus for the year of about $1.7 million. And this includes all the bonuses that we pay for staff, you know, the 5% year-end bonus, 2% Christmas bonus that the board approved. It reflects the new salary scale for teachers that was implemented last September. So on paper, we have a strong year so far. Any questions on the general fund?
I had one as far as, you said $5.1 million, okay? That was used on building maintenance, custodial fees and insurance and whatnot?
Yeah.
Now, that was covered by ESSER funds, right?
Not all of it. So for instance, our custodial costs us about 1.3 million for our custodial service. We also have like high-tech services, which are three.
But what I'm saying is, how much of that was actually ESSER funds of the 5.1? What I'm trying to figure out is ESSER funds
But
versus.
it would have been a combination of sinking fund, general fund, and ESSER funds, because we used all of those funding streams in the operations, maintenance, and repairs bucket.
See, I'm just wondering, my curiosity is, I guess you could say, is we've had ESSER funds coming in, and we've used some ESSER funds, you know, in some ways to offset some of the general fund usage that we would have to do. Do we know what portion of the budget, of this budget was that?
Yeah.
Because going forward, ESSER funds are dropping
Right.
off. So if that's continued cost that we're going to have,
Right. So
and therefore it becomes a continued expense
Right.
where we don't have a revenue to offset it other than the general fund.
we've been pretty careful to use ESSER funds just for one-time purchases, like, you know, like curriculum, purchase of media center furniture, those big-ticket items that don't occur every year. So a lot of districts might use bond money for this. You know, we were fortunate to get this type of money. So for next year, we're not expecting any adverse effect or very much of an adverse effect of the loss of ESSER funds. There's some things that are being paid for with ESSER, like these registered behavior therapists, that we're going to fund a few of those next year out of other sources. And that was ESSER 3 this year. But we've been pretty careful in our planning.
But you
to
understand where
avoid
my
that
concern
cliff.
lies?
Yeah,
Okay.
to avoid that
Okay, well,
revenue
that's good.
cliff,
I
they
mean, that's
call
a
it.
good answer.
Yep,
Oh, I like it.
yep.
Can we?
So-
Go ahead.
So my question is the retirement in here?
Yes.
It is. Okay, so if they do with that new bill, I think it's 951, I don't know.
Yeah. So whether that comes through, there's new information coming out all the time on that.
Yeah.
Whether that comes through as an increase in our foundation allowance, or if it comes through as a decrease in our retirement contribution, we're not sure yet.
Okay.
We'll know by the end of the summer.
13%, it was supposed to be reducing it, but
Yeah,
they
the
didn't
last-
say.
The last numbers I saw as of Saturday morning, Friday night, was 3% for the employee,
Yeah,
so, and then 7% for the district. But we didn't think we were gonna make a ton of traction on that, and then things started to move. So we don't know where the dust is gonna settle. But this, you know, our budget for our final amended budget is not taking that into consideration.
Okay.
Right.
Because those funds weren't part of the 23-24 school year.
Right.
I think some of the things that we've identified that we've been able to do with ESSER funds, those bonuses, the 2% and the 5%, that structure, once you start to count on those funds, like that's a shift for all of our employees. But otherwise, the way that Robert has done an intentional job of spending that ESSER money, you know, we're not laying off hundreds of people like other districts that use the ESSER money on people.
right.
So we're not seeing, you know, we're not laying off people. We tried to buy tangible things that could continue and we could get some life expectancy out of. I think the one area that's the hardest one is that bonus structure. It was a really nice bonus structure, and what we did learn by that bonus structure is that it actually did have an impact on attendance for staff and that piece. So that is something that the team would like to look at as we enter into future negotiations.
What's the life on the shrinking fund?
The sinking fund.
How much are we
I think
depleting it, or are we?
It's a 10-year total, 10-year millage total, and I think we're into year 3 right now.
Okay, and that's the final year, or?
We have 7 more years.
Is it 10-year?
10-year was the initial sinking fund, right?
Okay. But I say shrinking fund?
It's about 1.6, 1.7. Yeah, it's gone up actually this
Oh, okay.
year.
Okay.
For 25, it's projected a little bit higher than that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And sinking fund can only be used for certain things.
Certain
It can't be
things,
used
yeah.
for equipment. It can only be used for like repairs and improvements to the facilities. And I think buses also. Yeah. This is the general fund. The next slide, please, is the food service fund, or we call it student activity fund, which is comprised of the food service operations and student activities. Food service operations, that's the meal plan, the meals that we serve our students. This is showing that in the expenditure section, the third line down says operating transfer to general fund. The food service funds get to pay the general fund for like the use of the facilities, for our time for processing payroll, certain overhead costs that we could charge the food service fund and reimburse the general fund for. So after you take that 82,000, we're projecting that food service will be breaking even, revenue will equal expense. The nature of student activities is a break even also because it's fundraising stuff. So if you raise $100 in revenue, you're going to spend it on that specific purpose that those funds are raised for in an equal amount. So that's why we show no change in the ending fund balance, and the revenue over budget expenditures is 0, which is break even. Any questions on that fund?
We're only able to contribute how much to the fund equity on a yearly basis if we had it?
Well, this one would be-
I know you're showing break even this year.
Yeah, so this is probably conservative. I think they'll actually finish better than that. And so we have an opportunity to increase that amount, that the indirect costs that the general fund charges food service, which is in that operating transfer to general fund. So that could actually be higher than 82,000. Depends how. But food service, it's allowed to accumulate profits up to 3 months of their profits. And once you hit that point, you have to invest it back into the fund, like buy equipment,
That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
a situation, you can only contribute so much to the
Yeah.
general fund,
Yeah.
and then anything over that basically goes back.
It goes back into the fund.
So there's no advantage of trying to cut costs and save as much money as possible to build your general fund on food service.
You have to plow it back into the food service
That's what I'm
fund by buying equipment and stuff
That's
like
what I'm
that.
saying, that's the only,
So I don't know if you remember, I think it was 6, 7 years ago, we replaced, I think, a lot of the exhaust in our school building kitchens. And that's how we used our last surplus of food service funds.
Can that money be earmarked for something?
In
For
food service?
years? Yeah.
You can earmark fund equity at any of the funds for a specific purpose.
So it kind
Yeah.
of can go on, okay.
So what some districts will do is plan to buy new lunchroom furniture and work to build their fund to be able to get all the lunchrooms done, or they'll target a few lunchrooms. It just depends on your food service director and use of those. But we want that food service money to continue to improve our kitchens
Right.
and our food service areas, so that we get more kids eating healthy school meals.
Yep. So next slide, please. Debt fund. So the debt service fund is the amount of millage that the district is allowed to levy to our residents, taxpayers, for the purpose of paying the interest and principal on our bonds. So this financial statement right here does not have anything for the new 2023 bonds that were approved. That's almost $20 million that the district sold last February. So this is, because those payments don't start until May of 25. So it's just our existing debt rate prior to that bond issuance. And we're allowed to levy an amount that's enough to retire the current year's payments. So we told voters that, we're going to keep that millage at 3.5 mils. It's been that way for the last few years. So Last year, we levied 3.5 mils, and you'll see in '25, we're also levying 3.5 mils. So we expect that to be constant for a while. Any questions on this fund? Okay. Next slide, please. So we had a little bit of money left from restitution from like David Scawthorne and like, that whole scandal several years ago. And that's accumulated in this fund. And we've kind of kept it just in case we ever needed it. So it may be that, we use it this year or next year, maybe not. It could be a few more years, or we could just decide to roll it into our other capital projects fund, combined with the bond money. We'll see if we need it or not, but it's here if we do need it.
So
That's why you should.
So that's only $100 for the whole year?
That's pretty much interest and what maybe, yeah.
But they've paid back 36,000.
Yeah, it was actually more than that at one time.
I mean, we've spent some.
We spent it like years ago, like on band
That's nowhere
instruments and
near
stuff
what
like
they
that
owe,
with
so.
prior superintendents, yeah.
So it's going to continue to come in after this year.
Well, every once in a while, a check shows up, so, from the courts.
We get what we get, and we
Right.
don't roll with it.
Right.
Whopping 100.
I knew this a long time ago. I knew this a long time ago, this was occurring. It's been good. I'm surprised it's still occurring.
Yeah.
Right. 'cause
It's still going on, eh?
Yeah.
Every now and then something shows up.
Yep.
Okay. And enough has showed up to where we got, what, 37 you're saying right now?
That's what we have left. I mean, it was actually substantially more than that, like 10 years ago or so. So,
How much does it cost you to keep track of that?
nothing.
You understand where I'm coming from? For $100
Yeah.
bucks a
more than
year,
$100.
is it worth you guys even tracking it? Oh, never mind. I'll move on.
Right. Long job.
Okay, so this is the capital projects fund associated with the new bond. So during the course of this year, it was the beginning of February, we sold almost $20 million of bond out of the $36.4 million. So that's like the first series, we call it. We expect to spend about $4 million this year, and then the rest of those proceeds we spent over the next 2 years. Okay, so that's why we end up having, a surplus of $16 million for this fund. All these expenditures come to the board, so all those contracts are approved by the board before that money is spent.
Is this where we have to spend it by a certain amount of time?
I think it's, out of this bond issue, I think we have 5 years to spend 90% of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we won't have any problem doing that, so. Next slide, please. Sinking fund. So our sinking fund levy, it started out at three mils. It's been reduced. We'll get to that a little bit later with the tax levy slide. So we're bringing in about 1.7 million this year. We've had some expenditures, on different construction activities. A few years ago, the board approved a performance contract loan where we borrowed $2.4 million to make LED lighting improvements and our controls for our HVAC. 60% of those payments can come back to the sinking fund because LED is an allowable sinking fund expense. The other 40% has to go to the general fund because other expenditures didn't qualify for sinking fund. So that's what this fund is all about. Any questions here? Okay. Next slide, please.
How much longer is that one, the sinking fund?
I think we got 8 years to go.
8 more years left on that?
No, or seven.
And so we're going to get 1.7 for the next 7 years?
It goes up slightly every year as the value of the property goes up.
Okay.
So now we're into fiscal '25 original budget. This is the general fund. We're expecting less revenue than this year, like the amended budget showed 49 million in the middle column there for total revenue. Once that ESSER 3 drops off, it's about 8 million this year, dropping off, so that's why expenditures go down to 41 million. You can see it on that federal line, the third line down. where we got 15.8 million in the amended column, and it drops to 8.3 million in the 25 column. That's pretty much the difference year over year. You know, there are gonna be other, you know, increases like, you know, inflationary increases like in our property taxes and our, you know, our state. We still have some grants that are gonna be running out into next year, so state funding is, you know, actually projecting to be a little bit higher than, I mean, pretty much even with this year, within $1 million anyway, because some of those grants are dropping off. Next slide.
How much longer on the Macomb County enhancement?
On Macomb County, boy, I think about 5 years.
Still about 5 years?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Was it 10 year?
I think the maximum are 10 years.
I'm just saying, it was a 10 year to start, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not about 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there an increase in the pupil funding?
I'm projecting about $245. We don't know what that exact amount is.
But there is a chance that we won't know before
Right.
July 1. The governor's budget, the House and the Senate are not agreeing on the budget. So Robert is a conservative budget estimator and has estimated at a conservative increase.
Yep. So that also relates to that conversation we had a few minutes ago about the retirement rate. So depending on what they do with that, they could pass some of that savings on to us through a foundation allowance increase or a reduction in retirement rate, or they may, I guess, potentially spend that on something else. So we won't know. The state's year end is September 30th. They've been really good about having a budget to us like in the summer, but it could drag on to late summer. So.
But we're in a good place because we don't have to do any loans.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So
for
we're
sure.
really in a good place.
We got almost 30% fund equity.
Yeah,
If we keep it above 12 or 13%, we don't have to borrow.
yeah.
Right.
Which is weird. I don't understand why they do that. I mean, that's ridiculous. They know our budget's coming out. They should do the budget before,
Yeah,
so then we don't be in that problem.
right,
It's
right.
really good that we're in a place where we don't have to deal with that no more.
right.
But that, when I first got on the board, we used to, I'm like, this is weird.
Yeah, interest rates are a lot, I mean, they've gone up quite a bit, so it's a good thing we're not borrowing right now, because
Yeah. that is weird.
for a while, we were borrowing for less than 1%. Now it's like 4 or 5%, so, yep. Okay, next slide, please. So this is all the expenditures. They've been somewhat reduced for that $8 million. It's, you know, coming out of various lines. So we're expecting about a $500,000 surplus for fiscal '25. This does not include any of the, you know, that 2% and 5% bonus that we have, so that is not reflected in this budget. We'll see, you know, we'll just have to see how things shake out, you know, what funding is available. Our fund equity percentage jumps to 36%. I understand it's a high jump, but even though our surplus went down, it's because the formula for fund equity percentage is your fund equity divided by your expenses. So our expense base went down, you know, by 8 million, so that's going to raise up the percentage. It's just a function of the math.
Wait a minute, say that again. You said,
When someone asks about your fund equity, the percentage is calculated by taking your fund equity balance, which over here, like, use this column right here. It was $14 million divided by, over here, almost 48 million. That's how we came up with the 29.98. But this year, even though we only added a $500,000 to fund balance, our expenses went way down. See, from 48 million to 41.
okay,
So if you take the projected fund equity of, you know, 14.8 million divided by a smaller denominator, it's going to result in a higher percentage. So that's why it's roughly a 6% increase in our fund equity percentage.
all right.
Okay?
I thought you said it the opposite way.
Oh.
That's the way I heard it, but okay, that makes sense.
Any questions on general fund? Okay.
I
Yeah.
gotta ask, do we have a set dollar amount that we need to contribute to our fund equity on an annual basis to cover like maintenance? Do we have a figure that we've come up with to say we need to have contribute this much to fund equity on an annual basis in order to maintain our buildings and
Well-
facilities and things like that. I mean, do
I
we
mean-
have that number? Because I remember.
Well, I mean, like, you remember the presentation from Wolpert? I mean, they
Yeah,
say,
that's what I'm talking about.
I
They
think-
had that included in there.
yeah, they have it.
But I thought the number was much higher than the
It is.
465 that we do.
Yeah, it's like 2 million something a year that we should be spending.
So is that eventually we should reach the point where we want to contribute 2 million a year?
Well, we want to,
If our buildings are more efficient, it helps that area.
right, so the best way to do that would be bond and sinking fund, rather than relying on the general fund. So if we could have a recurring bond, you know, or
Gotcha.
a recurring sinking fund, it's going to relieve all those expenses out of the general fund.
So this is more like just emergency and that's it, pretty
Yeah.
much is what you want to set
Yeah.
aside.
So what would be in here, like going forward, if everything was working smoothly, would be preventative maintenance, like changing out filters, the steam traps, making sure all those are operating efficiently. Just think of your home, anything preventative that you could do will save money in the long run. Preventative maintenance would come out of the general fund. Food service fund, again, I'm just projecting a break even. We'll see what the results actually can turn out to be. It's this function of enrollment and how many kids are actually participating in our breakfast and lunch program. Debt service fund. So if you go to under revenue, local tax collections, you're going to see that this is the first year, and on our expenditures also, under principal and interest, the new bond is kicking in. So the increase from local taxes from 2.2 million to 2.6 is just the normal increase in property values. But when you go to the principal and interest under expenditures, you can see the total of those items, it goes up over $1 million, like 1.7 million because of the new bond. So this reflects a continued millage of 3.5 mils. We have some old debt that is maturing, and that's replaced by the new debt, and that's why we're able to keep that mill at 3.5 mils, just like we told the voters we would. So we can continue to levy whatever we need to retire the next year's debt. Okay? And there'll be some years that, the actual debt changes, like principal and interest change, so those differences would just come out of that fund equity portion of the debt service fund, if we keep that millage the same. Okay, this is that little capital projects fund again. Nothing happening here for next year. Next slide, please. This is the capital projects fund associated with the bond money, with that almost 20 million. So we have construction activities, the middle of your slide. We project about 15 million construction activities this year. This is the big year for the air conditioning. We have the parking lot that we're going to be paying for at Forest Park. All those improvements are hitting this fiscal year, the 2025 fiscal year, because those bills would come in after July 1. That's it for this one. Any questions on this one? Sinking fund. So again, we continue our millage. So this year it's about $1,750,000. That revenue is going to go up to about $2 million due to the same, due to our property value increases. The same expenditures are coming out. We have a payment on our performance loan contract, $121,000. This is just a number that I have really no basis for it. I just put like a placeholder in there for 1.3 million for construction activities. There'll be just some things that are not eligible for any of our other funds that we may have to charge here. And so, we still have we're projecting a fund balance of about 1.5 million at the end of the year. This money, even if the millage expires, there's no time limit to use this money. Next slide, please. So this is our property tax rate request form. This gets sent to cities of East Point and Warren, and it tells them how much to levy on our behalf to the taxpayers. So they send out their bills on July 1, and it will reflect these rates. I just want to point out something to you, like how this whole property tax thing works. You see that word that's right there where it says operating NH, that means operating non-homestead. So originally, when Proposal A passed, I think in '94, around there, that was 18 mills. That's what the full levy is that district can charge, is 18 mills. There's a cap on how much your taxes can go up. So property values can only go up a maximum of 5%. If it goes up more than 5%, theoretically, that rate comes down so it generates the same amount of revenue as if your property taxes didn't increase and they went up by 5%. So that rate got reduced from 18 mills to about 3 years ago or so, that we had went out for a new non-homestead millage. At that time was 17.76. And then last year it got reduced down to 16.89. If you go all the way down to the right here, it is now 16.4027 as a result of the property values increasing, and they're rationing that rate down so that it equalizes. So we're leaving behind about $500,000 of revenue. So one thing for this board to consider is the next time or sometime in the future, we need to plan out when we're going for a bond again, depending on what decisions are made later tonight. When we're going for a sinking fund again, when we're going to, we have to go for that 10 mil or our non-homestead renewal, but we may want to ask for a Headley override, which would allow the district to levy that full 18 mills. Because when this millage goes down, the state does not make up for that $500,000 with state aid. It's just money that's left behind. So it's something to think about, as we start planning our future millages.
By chance, what do other districts collect?
Well, a lot of them do have the Headley override language, so they can collect the full 18 mills. Mm-mm. No. See, if you go at the same time, it's a risk, right? Because they're going to see an initiative for your renewal of 18 mills, and they're going to see another ballot initiative for the Headley override. And there's a chance if they see both, they're only going to vote for one. And we don't want them to turn down, the big 18 mil number. So there's some strategy involved. You don't want to hit the voters too hard all at once. So we'll have to spread, look at a calendar long range and figure out when to do that if you guys decide to go forward with that.
Well, I was looking more at like the debt service. What do they normally carry there? Because if we were going to, like you said, have regular maintenance on our buildings, $2 million or whatever, like Wolpert said, it would be coming out of the debt service pretty much, right?
Well, those would be continued improvements and replacements, like major things like boilers and stuff like that. You could always use sinking fund. I think districts are over 7 mills at one time.
But I'm just saying, what are other districts collecting by chance? Do you have any idea?
I think a lot of them are around 7 mills.
So double of what we're collecting right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, the bigger the district, the lower the mills, because they just have a much higher property value base to spread it over.
Well, what I'm saying is if you have another district who has higher property values than ours, and they're collecting higher debt service percentage, then they're getting, what do you call it, not just incrementally, but exponentially higher amount of money for facilities.
Yep.
I guess you could say.
Yep. And then the sinking fund started out at 3 mills when it got approved by our voters a few years ago. And then that's ratcheted down to 2.72 mills. So you could also do, there's no override for this one like on Headley. It is what it is, so. Any questions on the tax rates?
Real good?
Okay. Yeah. So this one will need signatures from Mr. Williams and Mr. Grunberg before the end of the evening.
Well, move the hearing of the public to after based on the fact that there might be somebody here, but knowing that there probably wasn't anybody here, I figured we'd get most of our questions out of the way at this point, so that later on, when we get prepared to vote on whether to approve these or not, we don't have to ask so many questions. So I just want to make sure everybody's got their questions out of the way, I guess you could say. So when we get there, we're not going to be too.
Right. I'd like to compliment Mr. Carlesso.
Oh, thank you.
You know, like, Robert is exceptional in the big picture planning and all of the restrictions on all of the different funds, and he does an exceptional job in helping us manage our finances as an organization. And we would not be posting a 30% fund balance had it not been for your leadership. So we are thankful to that, Mr.
Thank you.
Carlesso. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, before I adjourn, do we want to take a break right after this meeting before the next? Oh, yes, I will do that first. But does anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing of the public is closed. Before I adjourn, do we want to take a break before the next meeting, or you want to just plow right into it? You want to take a break? Okay.
You need a break.
She wants a little bit of break. Okay, we'll take 5. Meeting adjourned, take 5. Order the regular meeting of the East Point Community Schools Board of Education at, we'll call that 6:45. Please call the roll.
Mr. Grunberg,
Here.
Dr. Early,
Here.
Mr. Williams here, Mr. Roscoe,
Here.
Mrs. Rayford,
Here.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Here.
Could all stand for the pledge. Dan will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Please call the vote.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mr. Williams, yes, Mrs. Rayford,
No.
Mrs. Richardson, Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Do we have a motion for consent agenda?
Make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Please call the vote.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mr. Williams, yes, Mrs. Rayford,
No.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Next, we have superintendent's report. Superintendent
Hi,
Gibson.
good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and for those of you joining us at home or from another place, this is your superintendent's report. We're going to keep focusing on those moments that matter. We had a great end of the year. That last week, I sure did enjoy seeing all of the educational fun happening around the district. Field day activities, dunk tanks, dunk buckets. Our staff really had a great last week with all of our students. Thank you to all of the members of the Strategic Plan Action Team. We had a final meeting on the last week of school. Probably a bad superintendent idea to get all of your teams together on the last week of school, but the teams came. They talked about our success in year one as well as our goals going into year two. And I think about 80% of the people that were on an action team want to continue to be on an action team next year. We are very lucky to have a volume of individuals that are dedicated to our school and making it better. Here you have some prep work for the new HVAC units at Crescentwood. There pictured is about 60 years of pencils and missing objects that were found when the heating vents were taken out. And it's a mixture of, it's a mixture of disgusting and kind of enthralling to me that we had a time capsule underneath of our heating units. Then,
Kids put them down there.
as a former classroom teacher, I can tell you that children will stick anything down those vents. Here we have the Forest Park parking lot work is beginning. And so Lake Forest Park will hopefully be resolved through fixing the drainage issues. And our summer construction is under full way. High school furniture was removed. Old furniture is being removed. New furniture is being planned to come in. Our summer discovery program is completely full and we have a waiting list. We have also hired a number of external teacher candidates to fill our roster, many of whom are already expressing some interest in becoming East Point Community Schools full-time employees after summer program. That program officially kicks off on July 8th. Summer meetup and eat up. We will be serving free breakfast and lunch this summer to any child under the age of 18, whether or not they are enrolled in a summer program. Meals will be served at both East Point Middle School on Kelly Road and East Point High School from July 8 to August 8, Monday through Friday. Breakfast will be available from 8 to 9 a.m. Lunch will be served beginning at 10:30 a.m. until noon. When you come with your family to eat meals at Meet Up and Eat Up, You must eat your meals on property and stay on site. So for any families out there in the community, we welcome you, and you are welcome to come and join us for breakfast and lunch at East Point High School and East Point Middle School. Upcoming events, Tuesday, July 2nd, we have our Gleaners food distribution. Please note that it is a date change. July 4 through 5, central office will be closed for the 4th of July holiday. And July 8 is our first day of K-9 Summer Discovery Summer School. Families, if you are still waiting to find out enrollment information, please check your inboxes. That information has been sent out to all of our families. Thank you so much, and that concludes your superintendent report.
Okay, next, is there a motion?
Hearing
Hearing of the public.
Anyone wish to hear it?
All right.
Don't forget, you gotta state your name. And if you start hearing this,
Good evening, and the board. My name is Mr. Zander. I'm the ambassador for East Point High School District. I am very pleased about the graduation ceremony, and I'm very happy to be there. All you wonderful people on top in the platform. The graduation went really well. I love it, and I'm glad to see all you people over there. And I just enjoy my break, and the superintendent, Mrs. Gibson, bless her heart. And you guys did an excellent job to be the board. I really appreciate it very, very much. And that's all I have. If I hear anything about the sports, I will let you guys know. But we are still working with the sports activities. So that's all I have. God bless you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
enjoy your summer. Okay, next, is there a motion for executive closed session? Attorney-client privilege.
Make a motion that we go into executive closed session, attorney-client privilege.
Support.
Please call the vote.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mr. Roscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Grunberg?
Yes.
Dr. Early?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayford?
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson? And Mrs. Grunberg?
Yes.
Stay in here.
Let's go on the council.
My mic's on, ain't it?
Yes, it's on.
Okay. Is Safety Technology Biennial EOP. I would move that the board approve the biennial EOP as presented.
Support. Minnie?
You wanna,
All right,
say what the acronym is?
The EOP is the Emergency Operations Plan for the district.
Which we can't really discuss in open, but too awful much for security reasons. Anyways, please call the vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mrs. Rayford,
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, next is business and operations. I would move the board approve the 2024 amended budget as presented.
Do them all at once? Or you gonna-
I could do them all at once, but we have the fourth one down there we didn't,
Yeah.
so I just prefer,
Okay.
we can do it. Yeah. That's just gotta be ready to, so fast. Who support?
Did you-
I support it. I support it.
All right, Robert.
Okay. Please call the vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mrs. Rayford,
No.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, I would move the board approve the 2025 original budget as presented.
Support.
Please call the vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mrs. Grunberg,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayford,
No.
and Mrs. Richardson.
Okay, in the case of the property tax levy, I would move the board approve the property tax levy as presented.
Support.
Yeah.
Please call the vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mr. Williams, yes. Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayford,
No.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, as far as recommendation purchase interior building signage, I would move the board approve that as presented.
Support.
Okay, now since this is a new item, if there's any questions, comments?
Was this signage for, I think, was, if I remember correctly, was elementary schools, right? And that's assuming nothing is going to change when we do this? Or are the signs removable and transferable if we happen to?
Yes, they are.
Okay,
There are like a modular unit, you can change like the names of the people inside their software, you can put different logos on it. It's tamper-proof. Security worked with the police department to number it in such a way that police can understand the layout of our buildings and get to a room quicker if they need to.
okay. Just wanted to make sure that if we had to
Yeah.
do any moving around it,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a problem. Okay.
It's like a Velcro way it fastens to the wall.
Okay.
Anything else? Please call the vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayford,
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, under curriculum, we have the 2024-25 MHSAA resolution. I would move the board adopt the resolution as presented.
Support.
So the MHSSA resolution is an annual requirement for the district to compete in athletic competitions. So it is an annual process. The district does a certification of our enrollment and then commits to MHSSA that we are going to compete in statewide athletic contests. and we agree to go by their rules, is essentially.
Those were the first, just the first one, or the both of them together?
It's only one.
It was only one, so it was another one underneath. I mean, I'm looking at. The board book. Yeah.
So there's two parts to the resolution on board book. The way that it shows up is first is the resolution, and the second part is the certification of the number of athletes that we had.
Okay, and that's the reason why you had six through 8 checked off. And that means.
And then 9 through 12.
And then 9 through 12, okay.
Now, one change that the board needs to be aware of, or it's not a change per se, but coming off of the pandemic, East Point High School will be the only school that can compete in athletics. If you are attending East Point Virtual Academy, which is a fewer number of credits for graduation, which is placement because you are behind in your credits, that's where we move students who might be juniors and have 1 credit. To protect the integrity of our virtual program that is really a tier 3 kind of school, we will not be allowing East Point full virtual students to participate in athletics. It has been too confusing, sends mixed messages. What we want is if you want to be an athlete for East Point Community Schools, you go to East Point High School. So I do want to make sure that the board is clear that this MHSSA resolution is for East Point High School and East Point Middle School. It will not include East Point Virtual Academy.
Thank you for that clarity.
Okay, please call a vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayford,
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, next we have Board of Education, long-term facility master plan, direction setting. After all of the discussion and everything, like all the information we gathered from the public discussion that we had here at the table, and with Walpert on multiple occasions, they've been here as well too. I'm prepared to make a motion. I would move that going forward, the Early Learning Center will remain a standalone program. Location to be determined.
Can you repeat that one more time, John? I'm sorry.
The Early Learning Center will remain a standalone program. Location to be determined. It'll stay in its current location for now, but if there's a change in the location, has to be determined yet. But it will remain standalone, that's the important part.
Okay.
It will not become part of any other program. Okay? The other 4 elementary style buildings, I guess you could say, would become K-5s. And then we would have 2 separate buildings, one for middle school, 6-8, one for 9-12 for a high school. Separate buildings, I have to stress that, but they would be located on the same piece of property.
So there'll be a mini campus.
You can call it campus, same piece of property, whatever you want to call it. So they would be on the same piece of property, yet they would be 2 separate individual buildings.
Okay, but my question is the closeness of where these 2 buildings will be. Would it be next door to each other, or be some space, or where would it be?
Well, that will be determined, but they would be on the same property as to how close they would be, much like in many of the other districts around us. That would be determined in the future. We won't be approving it.
We gonna cement the windows.
We won't be approving a location right now. We're just going to approve the fact that they will be on the same location, separate buildings. How far apart and that discussion can go in the future.
After you determine where it's going to be at?
So the district team is probably going to need about a year to work through a local plan. So this, what board president is making for a direction is a unified pre-K program, a K-4, K-5 elementary schools, and a unified 6-12 campus. We don't have the details worked out for that piece, Trustee Richardson. Our team is going to start the joint commission with the city and begin having some of those conversations. I think what I hear board president advocating for is what you advocated for in our discussion last week, which was the 6th through 8th and the 9 through 12 need to be geographically separated as much as possible. But if we, so that was option 2 in Wolpert. If we demand that they be separated, I want to remind you that that is the status quo of what we currently have. And the district will not see long-term savings. We need to reduce our footprint and we need to deal with a very large high school campus and an underutilized middle school. So setting this direction of having a pre-K program, 4 K-5 buildings, and then having a unified campus, then cues our team to begin having all of those detailed conversations. Will it be a new location? Will we renovate the old high school? Will we put everybody at the current, we don't know those pieces. But at least this helps us to set a directional course instead of staying stagnant. You're going to vote, the board president is asking this evening on the agenda that we set a direction and is proposing the direction be a standalone pre-K building, or it could be on a unified campus for, I know, it's your sticking point is the unified campus 6 through 12. I understand, and I think that's why board president, when he made his motion, was saying he wanted to honor what we talked about at our last meeting, and that we might understand there will be a cost savings, but whatever we do, we want to have them separated from each other.
Well, and as part of the direction, I want to be clear that, to me, these would be separate buildings, and we would be doing everything within our power to make sure that the students from the middle school, 6, 8, do not intermingle with the students from the high school, 9, 12, be it through distance, could be through start and release times, could be through a whole bunch of things. Those discussions to take place in the future, and final approval of location, how far apart they are, and everything like that would come at a later date. This just sets the direction that they're going to be on the same location. How we accomplish that and make sure the students don't intermingle, we can decide that at a future date. Okay. Yep. Also, with that being said, so we know the direction as far as the bond money is concerned, I do want to make sure that we have enough money earmarked to supplement the money we're getting set, and this is part of the motion, to supplement the money that we are receiving from the state to get the pool up and running. So I expect that bond money will be used to supplement that so we can get the pool functional. And then the rest of the bond money should be spent primarily on the K-5 buildings. And if you reach those 2 points and there's still leftover money, I'd like to designate the auditorium as a structure that will not be going anywhere, so any leftover bond money could be put into that structure. I don't think we'd have any bond money left over after that. But I just want to make sure we have bond money coming in, we have a direction for it all to go, we have a direction for our buildings to go as well too.
Absolutely.
And then once we get to, this is now not part of the motion, so that's the end of the motion as far as I'm concerned. Okay?
So you do need support.
Is there support?
Support.
Yes.
Number, so the K-5, we're gonna keep all 4 of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Your concern. So state your concern because I probably have an answer for it.
I don't,
Are you concerned that it's too many buildings?
yes.
Okay. That was part of my thought process as well, and the reason that I did it as I stated, and I questioned Carrie on this as well in the last meeting, if we direct the bond money to improve all 4 of those buildings, none of that money would be lost if we decide a couple years down the line, before we do any action on the early learning center, if we decided we wanted to turn one of those newly remodeled elementary buildings into an early learning center, we would not lose any of the money that was invested into the building. And that we would have a chance to look at our numbers for the next couple years to decide whether we warrant actually 4 elementaries or 3. I'm assuming, based upon the numbers I'm seeing, and it's starting to level off at the elementary level, and a couple of the lower L and upper L actually starting to increase a bit, I think, on the east side of Gratiot, as well as our early learning center being at capacity and probably needing a bigger building to increase the capacity, because they have a nice waiting list already. And with those factors in play, I'm assuming that we will probably need the 4 buildings anyways for the 4 elementaries. Something happens, we don't need one, we convert it into the early learning center. We will not have wasted any of the bond money because all those improvements would still be utilized, just by a different
Front-loading
rate.
your investment.
Just ensuring that
Yes,
we're not
insurance.
wasting it someplace
That's
that
right.
wouldn't be
That's-
used.
I think the
That's
other
my
piece to
problem.
consider is we can say a directional unified campus, that if our enrollment continues to decline, we are going to need to come back and address that.
Oh, we can do that.
You know,
We will, we don't.
There are no promises. What I see, the direction helps our team to start moving and assessing property and coming up with some plans to bring to the board as we progress through this process. I support the 4 elementary schools because of the geographic location in our community. And if we really want to live into our mission is to be community focused and to be the heart of caring and learning in our community. We need those 4 neighborhoods around our elementary schools to synergize and work together. And I would anticipate increased student enrollment with fewer transitions. We lose a lot of children on our transitions from 2nd to 3rd and 5th to 6th.
So this is basically a conditional vote.
What, unconditional in what way?
Oh, there's no crystal ball.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
That's what I hear you
Because we
say.
may have to come back and change something.
Right.
Right.
At
I
least
think
this
that's what
sets
it might
at
have
least it
been.
sets a direction.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's like, you're gonna head down the road, but, you may come into some road construction down the line where you may have to veer off and do something different to get to where your final destination is. That's quite possible, but at least you have to have a direction that you're going in to start with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Please call a vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mrs. Rayford,
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson, Mrs. Grunberg,
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, next we have Board of Education meeting schedule. I would move the board, approve the Board of Education meeting schedule as presented.
Support.
Any comments or questions? Please call the vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mrs. Rayford,
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, next we have Human Resources. I would move that the board approve the central office structure presented with one of the positions coming back to us once a final decision is made on that position, and the job description and what the posting might be on that position. That would come back to the board at that point.
Support.
Please call a vote.
Mr. Grunberg,
Yes?
Mr. Williams, yes. Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayford,
No.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Okay, I would move that the board approve the non-affiliate contracts as presented.
Support.
Please call the vote.
Okay, Mr. Grunberg,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Dr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Williams, yes. Mrs. Rayford,
Yes.
Mrs. Richardson, and Mrs. Grunberg.
Yes.
Motion carries. Meeting adjourned, 7:51.
All right.
Here, pass this $5 down to John, I lost
You
the
lost,
bet.
you lost the bet.